Introduction to verb stems, Binyanim. We now turn to a major transition in Ross's textbook. We're going to look at the verbs now in a big way. Up till now we've looked at all the basic forms, and now we're going to look at the whole verb system. And this will cover everything from chapters 26 to 40. After chapter 40 in Ross's textbook, he goes into readings and reads several chapters from Genesis and gives helps to help you understand what the readings are. And while he's going through the readings, he inductively reviews everything that we've done up to that point. But this section here on the verbs is very important. Understanding the verb system and getting a grip on that, you don't have to memorize the whole thing, but getting a grip on that in first year Hebrew is a major task. So really, it will pay dividends if you put some energy into this section. What I want to do now, in this module here, I want to introduce verbal stems, talk about the verb system. In the next module, I'll talk about a strategy for learning verbs. So let's talk about verb stems. Ross calls them stems. Some people call them themes. Another word is binyan. Binyanim is the plural. What are these? Well, probably the best way to get a grip on this is to turn to page 544. This is the verb chart at the back. So 544. Oh, I have to learn to get used to writing this again. Okay. Page 544, and actually it goes over into 545. What you have there are all your binyan, all your stems. You notice on the far left, you have the perfect. Okay, we've already taken this. And so you'll see the whole perfect paradigm there. Pakad, pakada, pakadta, etc. Underneath it, in the first column, you'll see the imperfect. And then underneath it will be the preterite. And then what do they have? Jussive, cohortative, imperative. And then on the next page, he'll have the two participles, active and passive, and the two infinitives, the construct and the absolute. Okay, so that first column there, we've actually covered everything in there up till now. And at the top of it, there'll be a label, a name, and it's cal. This is the name for that column. And this is the name of the binyan, or stem. You call these columns here binyan, or binyanim, or stems. Now, if you go to the right, the next column is called nifal. So write that down. And if you spend a few moments and take a look at the contents of the paradigms here, you'll see that they are related to the paradigms we've already taken in the cal. What's different is that we have added a nun to the root. So we have our three letters of the root, three root letters, we've added a nun at the beginning. Remember, for any given verb, pakad is our paradigm verb, so for any given verb you have the same root, and it runs through the perfect, all the forms of the perfect, and the imperfect, and all these other forms here, but the same root. When you move it over into the nifal, we take the root, pakad, and we add a nun to it at the beginning, and we run through the same patterns again. So you can see how knowing this pattern well will help you with this pattern, right? Now, sometimes what happens is, so here in the perfect, you add a nun, you have your three root letters, and you add the same endings. It's not hard to recognize because nothing's really changing other than adding the nun. In the imperfect, we'll add our nun here, but the imperfect has prefixes. So you'll get a prefix here, and of course some forms have a suffix as well. Now when you have a prefix, then things can happen here. So sometimes, for some forms, when you add the nun, you'll see some changes. And so this is why we have to go through and study these in detail. But they are based on the perfect here. Okay, so what's happening here is we have one root running through all these forms, and each paradigm set has its own set of endings or prefixes. So suffixes, prefixes, or infixes, things in the middle, things in the end, things in the beginning. As we move over here, what we have is a consonantal change. These are root consonants. We're adding a binyan consonant. So it's a heavy change. It's a major change. And it will be there through the entire binyan. you look at the next one, we have a Piel. Now my challenge is going to be to put all this onto one page. The Piel, we have our root with 3 letters. The consonant we add actually is a doubling. We double the middle consonant, and it's indicated with a dagesh forte. So again, just like we have a consonantal change here, we have one here too. It's a heavy change. And this doubling of the second radical runs through all the forms. Now let's go over to the pual, which is the next column, next binyan. Pual, if you look at it, compare the forms, they're all there in that page. This is the page you're going to become very used to. And it's good to visualize in your mind one way of looking at this. So whatever textbook you're looking, find the tables and then become used to them, because it becomes a quick reference then. If you're reading in a text in the Bible and you forget what something is, you can go look it up and you know, oh yeah, okay, this is the one that sits up in the top right corner or whatever. Wherever it is visually in your mind. I think it's helpful, at least for me, to always have everything in the same place. Gives one more aid to learning. Okay. The pual, if you look at the paradigms there, you'll see that it also doubles the second radical. And in fact, what we have here is the pual is the passive of the Piel. So how do you tell these two apart? Well, there's a vowel change, a vowel difference. The Piel is characterized by an I under the first radical, and the pual is characterized by a U, U. And you can see that that's reflected in the name. Piel, pual. Actually, there's another vowel change or vowel difference here. You have a tere generally, and some forms don't always have that, and you have an a here, an a vowel. These names are all based on the perfect 3ms form. So the very first one in your column, the top one, it's basically the verb pual. I don't want to write here because I want to, well, I'll write it and then I'll take it off. Some textbooks use pual as their paradigm verb. We're using pakad. But if you take pual and you add you take the perfect 3ms form of pual for each binyan and you get the name. So pual, okay, Piel, nifal, you put a nun here, nifal. That's where the name comes from. So if you learn these names, learn how to pronounce them correctly, nifal, for instance, it'll be an aid for you to remember that, okay, there's a nun, we have an I sound, we have whatever the radical is, and then we have an A sound. So that'll help. When I first learned these names, I didn't learn them properly, so I said nifal. Well, it helps if you learn it properly. Nifal, Piel, pual, and even kind of emphasize it a bit. I'll try to do that, but I may slip into my old bad habits too. Okay, let's see here. It's been a while since I did this. Forget my keys. Okay, so we have kal and nifal. Nifal, by the way, is the passive of the kal generally. Pual is the passive of the Piel. Then we have another one. The next one in line here is called the Hitpael. Oops. Hitpael. See, it's better if you pronounce this correctly. Hitpael. And, or some people say Hitpael, if you're pronouncing the TH the way it probably was pronounced historically. And again, it doubles the second radical. And it also adds, really what it is a tav infix. You put a tav here, but there's a hit in front of it for some forms. You have hit, or you have, once you move down, if you look down the column into the imperfect, you'll see yit in some forms, or tit, or et, or nit. And then in the participle, you see mit. This one is easy to recognize because this prefix here is so big, and it's so audibly recognizable that when you encounter it, it's not that hard. But you can see how these three are related. They're related because they all double the second radical. So that's a set. Maybe I won't put a box around it; it'll get too messy. And then we have two others. We have the hifil. Let me write that down here. Hifil, and that, okay, if we take our root, 3 root letters, and we add our hey to it, well, the hey is our sort of characteristic marker of the hifil. And if you look here, you'll see an I here. You actually have a vowel, an I vowel here, and you have an IE vowel here as well. But in terms of consonants, which is the big change, as you move across these binyan, nun, doubling the second radical, and hey. And then you have our last one is the hofal. Hofal. You can see the vowels there, your characteristic vowels. And again, you can guess here, with the h on there, it's going to be a hey. A hey prefix. Well, I don't even want to call it a prefix, so don't mix it up with the prefixes of the imperfect form. But the consonant that you add to make this binyan, the binyan consonant is hey, just like here. And just like here, where we had the two adding the same, having the same consonantal change, in this case doubling, the difference was the vowels. Here too, you have hifil and hofal, where this is the short O, the kamet satuf. And you can probably guess, this is the passive of the hifil. Hofal is the passive of the hifil, just like the pual is the passive of the piel. And the nifal is also the passive of the cal. Now, when we go into the chapters and we deal with these in detail, we'll talk about how to translate them, and there's a bit more to it than this. But this gives you a general overview. Let me underline them here. Now, what is the function of these things? Why does Hebrew do this? Or how is this used in Hebrew? What happens is, you'll have verbs that will be in multiple binyan. There are very few verbs that actually exist in all these binyans, or binyanim. But many verbs will have more than one. So you'll have a verb, for instance, let me turn to, I've got some examples here in the hifil chapter. Where's the hifil chapter? Chapter 30. If you want to follow me here, chapter 30, point 3, section 30.3, page 213. Of course, we'll deal with this when we deal with the chapter, but I want to give you a little bit of sense of why we have this in Hebrew. If you have a word like malach, malach means he ruled, okay, in the perfect over here in the cal. When you take that same verb, malach, and you put it into the hifil, you get himlich, and it means he enthroned. So here it means he ruled, here it means he enthroned. And the basic meaning of the hifil is causative. So if you have a verb that is in both the cal and the hifil, often the hifil will be the causative of the cal. So if the cal means to rule, then the hifil will mean he caused to rule, or he enthroned. He enthroned someone. He caused him to be the ruler. They give a couple of examples. Ra'ah, he saw, would become he caused to see, or he showed. The third example here is shama, he heard. Now if you cause to hear, this would be hishmiya. If you cause to hear, you are informing. So you have one verb here, and you put it into another binyan, and you give it a new meaning, a new nuance to it. And basically this is causative, and then this is the passive of the causative, hofal, because it's passive of the hifil. Piel is intensive, at least that's one of its uses. And pual would be the causative, or the passive, of the piel. Hitpael is often iterative, or a reciprocal, or reflexive, person doing an action back on themselves. And so halach over here, hithalech, I guess hithalech, that would be he walked to and fro. In fact, it's used in Genesis. God walking to and fro in the garden. It's something he did habitually. So these binyan, and this here, nifal is the passive, sometimes reflexive, of the cal. So what this allows here is you have a verb and you put it in different binyan, and you can get different meanings out of it. You have to be a bit careful. The meanings are not always, they don't always line up with these general functions, causative, intensive, or whatever. So you have to look them up in dictionary. But it's important to be able to distinguish these binyan, because when you see them in a text, and you see that your verb is not in the cal, but is in one of these other ones, you have to ask yourself, okay, what does it mean here? And it can sometimes mean something quite different. So that is the verbal stems, the verbal stem system, or the binyanim in Hebrew.